Hello and welcome to our webinar today. We're going to be discussing quality measurement data and the impact of your supply chain. My name is Tim Crisp. I'm the Director of Sales here at merQbiz, and I will also be joined by Audrey Hum, our Tech Sales Manager. Before we get started, a couple of items of housekeeping. Everyone will remain on mute for the entirety of this webinar. If you do have a question, please submit it in our question box. Also, if you have an idea for future webinars or information that you would also like to see, please also submit that as well, and we can cover that in future webinars. So for today, we're going to review who merQbiz is, give you kind of a background of the foundation and how we were created, quality measurement technology, what the probe is, what does it measure, how does it work, and how we use the data. What are the insights that we're able to derive from our analytics that we've created by surfacing the data from the probe. So who is merQbiz? So merQbiz is a company that's based in El Segundo, California. It was founded by Voice and Boston Consulting Group Digital Ventures. The purpose of this company and its charter was to develop and deploy digital solutions to the recovered paper and paper industries. So we have created a suite of tools based on many of the challenges that we face today. As you guys know, when we look at trying to derive data from bell breaks and other bells that we're processing and paper that's moving through the process, the data available is very limited. It's subjective because bell breaks, for example, or if we're not doing bell breaks, it's still ocular based. We're trying to grade a bell by the way we see things. It's inconsistent because the way people measure it is different. There's no scientific way that we can deploy. It's very labor intensive, and we have to require a lot of manpower if we want to do a bell break, and it also takes a lot of time, as you may know. Safety concerns of putting people in the line of fire by having to remove the wires on the bells themselves, and then the potential content that could be in the bell also. And then the variability itself that is found in the supply and trying to capture the value and looking at all that variability. So how do we deliver value? We deliver value by reducing costs, increasing returns, and supporting your sustainability goals. And we're doing this by being able to surface data on your incoming paper supply. So we have created a product known as Belle Vision that is built of a suite of tools that provide you these insights from us surfacing the data from a lot of different areas, both quality, procurement, as well as ways to manage your suppliers. So before we dive off into what we do with the data and our analytics, let's talk a little bit about the technology, what we're measuring, and how the technology works. So we use an NIR probe or near infrared technology that we are able to insert into a bell of fiber or a paper bell. And from this, we're able to measure a few different elements. We're able to measure the moisture of that bell, the percent of plastic that is contained, ash, fiber, total percent of fiber, and then also a breakdown of that fiber. We're able to, with some level of confidence, determine if it's mechanical pulp or chemical pulp by looking at the residual lignin that resides on that fiber. So how does this all work? So if you're not familiar with NIR technology, think of it as a simple form as it's a wavelength of light. This wavelength of light is transmitted into the different elements that exist in the bell, and these elements absorb that light. The absorption rate of the light is different according to every element. There is also, because of the absorption, there is a reflection of this light, which corresponds to a wavelength similar to how you would think of a sound. So light and color also have wavelengths. So through measuring this reflectance of wavelength. That wavelength corresponds specifically to an element, and the probe has the ability to look at that wavelength and then determine what element it is. And it is programmed specifically to measure these elements that we have listed here: moisture and plastic, ash, and then the types of fiber. Confidence in the probe is sometimes something that we run into, and people have questions. The probe, being that it's kind of new to the industry, NIR, even though NIR is not necessarily new to the industry, it's used in the paper industry in certain labs. It's also used in flow meters and some of the other consistency transmitters that exist. So there are places you can find it, but it is being deployed slightly different here and in an application that is a little bit unfamiliar. So the chart in front of you shows a comparison of our probe versus Belle brakes. And so for you can see here the consistency of the trials that we've ran, the probe's measurement compared to the lab's measurements, or the measurements that each test was done by many times our customers, or tests that we've also ran. The confidence rate is very high. So another way to look at this is when we plot this and look at it on a scatter plot, what is the value, or what is our confidence rate? So you can see here, we have a confidence rate, or an R-square value of 0.95. So what we like to say is there's more variability in your Belle brake than there is in the probe that we're actually measuring. And from many side-by-side samples that we have done, both internally as well as with our customers, we continue to see a high repeatability rate of the probe of what it's measuring. So let's talk a little bit about the process itself. So we have a lot of different ways that we can do this. We have both a manual way of testing bells, where we can drill and probe, all the way to fully automated equipment that will also do this testing for you. So to answer the questions, well, how long does this take? How many bells can be tested? We have a little chart here that kind of shows whether we have one inspector or two, or if you did this internal to your mill. So it takes about 15 minutes to test a bell if you just have one inspector. This is a lot of time for him to actually drill the bell, and then to insert the probe, and then to measure that hole that was drilled in a 360-degree circumference area. This can be reduced to 6 minutes or less if we have two testers, meaning one person is drilling and then another one is probing. The probe itself, its measurement, it's looking at so many measurements per millisecond, and it's based on a timer, which is dictating that 6 minutes. That 6 minutes is also being dictated because we drill 3 holes in every bell to make sure that we get a good sample representation of the bell. So how many bells do we sample per truck? So what we have found to get a good representative sample of what is contained on the truck or in the container is 3 bells. One in the back, one in the middle, and then one in the front. And so what does this accumulate to? Typically in a shift, we can do 18 to 24 bells if we have one tester, or up to 60 bells if we have 2 inspectors. So now that we've got the data and we've probed it, and you understand and you see how the probe works and how we're using NIR, so what now do we do with this data? We have a lot of different data. We have the data that we pulled from the bell, and then we have other data that we utilize around transportation costs, maybe the cost of the bell, and some other different business dynamics that are important to understand truly what we're purchasing, what our suppliers look like, what is the quality of the material coming in, what's the variability look like. So now I'm going to let Audrey Hum run through and show some of our different analytics that we use and how we surface this data.
Thanks, Tim. Again, my name is Audrey Hum, our technical sales manager here at merQbiz, and I'm so excited to get to share with you all our quality analytics platform today. Before we dive in, I did want to just revisit the process for just how all of this quality data makes its way into the platform that we'll go through here in a minute. So first, of course, as Tim has gone through, we have our bales. They're coming in. We have moisture, plastic, maybe wood, clay, all kinds of things that we really want to measure. We want to start understanding what's coming into the facility. What's the cost of all this material? What's the cost to dispose of it? And that's where the probe comes in, right? So we see the probe here pulling those readings in. That's the operators or our client team members as well that have been trained to utilize the probe. And once that reading is complete, it actually is transferred into our application, which you see here in the center of the screen. So the operator then enters any necessary details about the supplier, that information. And some of our clients have automated data protocols that run in the back end. So really making that process super simple, even as easy as just pushing a submit button. And then all of that data is transferred into our merQbiz cloud. And as Tim mentioned, that is then combined with information about your suppliers, information about your costs, where we can really start to put all that together and create some analytics. So now we're just, as I said, going to kind of just dive into a couple of samples of the analytics tools that we do have available. And just keeping in mind as we go through this that there are other tools available that we won't get into today, but maybe in future sessions. And if you have any questions, as Tim mentioned, just submit those into the question box and we will make sure we visit those at the end of the session. So right as we come into the analytics platform, we're really greeted with this great kind of 30,000 foot view, kind of a temperature check for all of our facilities. So if you have one location, of course, this would just be showing that individual location. But again, the great thing here in the sample where we have maybe multiple mills, multiple facilities, we'll really start to be able to have some comparison across those facilities. As I'm seeing here, right when I come in to my dashboard, I have my overall yield, my bale yield across all these facilities. I'm able to get an idea of my material cost and things like my landed cost and what we call merQbiz landed cost. So where landed cost is taking into account the price that you're paying for that material and any cost to ship it to you, the merQbiz landed cost is a really great field to kind of, again, start to understand the data a little bit better because it puts a factor on that landed cost based on the yield that you're bringing in or the yield that that supplier is bringing in. So where you might be used to using landed cost, this is another really interesting metric to start including in some of these analyses. So this graph here on the left-hand side starts to give us the ability to compare our grades, that are going into different mills, as well as this one on the right-hand side. So for example, for our number 11, we are paying $138 at mill 2, $133 at mill 1. As you all know, that $5 difference across the number of tons we're bringing in per month across all of those months of the year can really start to make a big difference. So we might want to dive into what's causing that discrepancy. Is it the transportation costs? Is it the cost of the fiber that's driving up those costs at mill 2? Or is it that we're getting lower quality? So these charts can start to help us just dig into some questions. Now, where we go from here is starting to try and answer some of those questions. So, which suppliers are bringing in better material to our facility? Which ones maybe are bringing in lower quality material? And again, that may be driving up our costs. And again, what I can do here is I'm gonna just come in and I'm gonna choose our number 13 DLK. That's what I wanna focus on here in this example. And I'm going to start to see that supplier 10, supplier 4 are kind of falling towards the bottom of the pack. Maybe we want to take a closer look at them. Another way we can do this though is, maybe these are brokers, or maybe they have multiple locations that they're sending us material from. One of the ways that we can really help you understand your material better is by starting to illuminate where that material is coming from. So in this instance, I'm going to select that supplier origin. And I'm just going to come in and I'm going to select a couple of these suppliers. Again, maybe supplier 2 and supplier 10, so we can get an idea, where their material is coming from and which of their locations are potentially the ones that are bringing in worse material for us. And here again, I get a much more clear picture that it is supplier 10's location 28 that's bringing in worse material for us. So then rather than going to supplier 10 and just saying, hey, we're having a problem with quality, we can say, hey, maybe we could have a conversation about your location number 28. Or again, if it's a broker, we can say, hey, this particular supplier, we're seeing some issues from. And this is data that maybe we didn't have access to before. Another quick tool we can have here, I keep saying communicate with your supplier, share this information. We can very quickly share these reports and dashboards directly from the screen here, directly from your browser. You can share the entire report, of course, or you could also even just share a portion of the report if you wanted to make just that available, again, to whoever you're speaking to, and it will contain all the filters that you've previously put into the report. So now we've got an idea that we know, again, this location 28 supplier 10 is bringing in some maybe lower quality. Again, it's going to be driving up our landed cost. The question is, what's causing the problem, right? What is the problem with supplier 10, location 28? Well, our contamination ranking report is really, again, where we just get to go another level deeper and a little bit more in depth to start to understand where some of those problem areas may be. Here we're seeing our moisture, our plastic, and our ash, all those things that are being measured by the probe that are being pulled into the system. Again, so now we can get a really clear picture. And we're seeing that we have a couple of problems with supplier 10, location 28, right? With our benchmark for moisture being 12%, they're exceeding that here on average. Again, with plastic, we're seeing some pretty high plastic numbers, and the same thing with our ash and other category. So this is a wonderful report because, again, rather than just saying, looks like we have a problem, I'm feeling like there's an issue, this is that data-driven information that Tim was speaking to, where now we have a very clear picture of what the potential issue may be. And of course, with all of these, I don't have to just focus on that problem. I can kind of bring it back up to a higher level, and I can come back again to those suppliers, and I could see that kind of stack ranker of all my suppliers again. Again, this is going to highlight for me any of those potential issues I may have with plastic, with moisture, and maybe there's nothing I really need to address, like in this moisture scenario here. But again, in plastic, I might see, wow, there's a lot of opportunity for improvement, some opportunity for some conversations about improving this plastic level here. And one final thing to point out, of course, here we're going to be using this ISRI Max, so 12% for moisture, 1% for plastic. We also can do that just based on, an internal average, if you're wanting to just compare them against their peers and what they're bringing into the facility. Or we could set that as an internal benchmark as well. We really want this to be something that you're comparing to what makes sense to you and something that can help you make the best decisions. Again, a couple of other things that we'll be covering in other sessions, things like how to manage and track deductions, digging a little bit deeper on these prohibitive numbers, helping you understand the financial impact, and things like historical data, historical trends, who's improving over time. Are my plastic numbers increasing, decreasing, et cetera, if that's a focus of mine. So this concludes the presentation portion for today's session. We hope you join us for future webinars and that you found today helpful and effective. If you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A and we will begin answering some of those now. And we will go ahead and answer some of those now. So just pulling up some of these questions that everyone had. First question in the Q&A. Of course, the always first question in here is a technical question. So if anyone had issues with the audio or with the visual, nothing like a live presentation, right? So we will be sending out the recording of today's presentation. We apologize if you had any technical difficulties. Moving on to some other kind of questions about Belle Vision though and merQbiz. One question here we had was kind of how large are the mills that we work with, the different companies that we've been working with. And really it's a wide range where you're working with groups with multiple mills and really that process up to 3 million tons per year. So it really just kind of depends, and we do have options for smaller mills as well. So we really encourage you to reach out to us to kind of just explain to us some of the problems that you're facing, and we can certainly work through a solution for you. Another question that we had here is a really great question, a good thing to point out, how secure is our data? We talk a lot about transferring data going into the probe, storing it in our database. And we take data security and data privacy very seriously. Just a few ways that we ensure these protections are encrypting data. right? So in transit, meaning when it's traveling, right, from the probe to the app and into our database. And then at rest, right? So when it's living in that database, all that information is going to be secure and protected. We utilize multi-factor authentication, something that we implemented recently. So that's like when you're going into your Gmail, your Facebook, and you have to enter that code. Really, it's just ensuring that you are who you are and no one else is going to be accessing your secure data. And then also obtaining SOC 2 Type 2 compliance. That might sound like a bunch of acronyms and letters and numbers mixed together, but I guarantee your IT team likes to hear that. So if you're going through an IT compliance or a security training as a part of implementing a software, a program, or any protocol, those are definitely things that they like to hear. And then another question we had here, can I purchase or lease a probe? And then kind of a second part there, second part of the question, will be training be included? So kind of answering the first part there, we offer a variety of options. Again, we really want to be partners. We want to work with you to make sure that you have the things that you need, that you're not purchasing expensive equipment if you don't really need to use it every day, you know, if you aren't having the same needs as someone that does need, right, to purchase that equipment. And, you know, really part of that process that we have is to offer solutions consulting as a part of our implementation process. So we'll come on site, we have an implementation period where we work with you to understand your goals. And of course, a part of our initial process is to, of course, to explain those different options to you. So yes, of course, purchasing and leasing are all options, and training is provided, of course, as well. We're working through, of course, how we're moving forward with that, but we have developed remote training options. Kelly Kessler, our implementation manager, manages all of the training for the analytics program, the dashboards, and then our quality team, they manage, of course, all of the training on the probe, how to run the audits themselves, and how to get the best data. So a couple of other questions were submitted in here. I'm just reading through them to see if there's any that I can answer quickly that aren't just about technical difficulties, of course. So a good question here, another one about audits. The bale probing, is this based on random selection of the bales, or are we including 100% of the bales? Really great question about the process, right? And this is something that our quality team has really worked through to get a great process in place, ensuring that we're getting, of course, there is some random selection in there, right? Because we don't want to go in and just do all of your bales. No one has time to do that. But it can either be kind of that random spot check, right, based on trucks coming in, or it can be a targeted approach. And that's kind of that approach that we're speaking to when we say we've developed that over time here, based on getting that 80-20 rule. We want to make sure we have some statistical relevance when we're going in. And that's a part of that 90-day implementation as well, making sure we get the right amount of data and we get good data. So thank you so much for that question. And it looks like we have addressed everything that's been submitted here, but if you have any other questions that kind of come up as you're thinking through things, or if you watch the recording again, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn, or reach out to one of our sales managers, and we'll be happy to get an answer back to you. And again, we thank you all so much for joining today, and we will be sending out the recording, and we hope you all join us again soon. Thanks so much, and have a great morning or a great afternoon.